Dehancer is an incredibly powerful film emulation plugin with more than 60 film stocks and true film characteristics like film grain, breadth and damage, halation and highlight bloom. If you want to elevate your color grading, then Dehancer is a tool you should consider adding to your toolbox. Quick disclaimer, Dehancer did reach out to me and asked if I could test their plugin. However, they did not tell me what to say. And I've been testing the plugin for a little bit of a month now, and I will give you both the pros and cons I found while using it. Also, I'm not a pro colorist, and there's more than one way of color grading. This is my workflow, and I encourage you to experiment and find out what works best for you and the type of work you do. Dehancer is available for these video and photo editors, and Davinci Resolve is my editor of choice. Go to the Dehancer website here and also linked in the description below. Download the installer for your respective operating system. Please take note of the hardware and software requirements, especially the GPU. You'll see why later on. Click download and try. Close Resolve if it was running. Unzip the downloaded file. If you have an NVIDIA GPU, then run the CUDA file, else run the OpenCL file. Then just follow the setup instructions. Once the installation is complete, start Davinci and open your project. You need to load the camera profiles and film stocks the first time you use Dehancer. Therefore, go to the color page and add Dehancer to your clip. Then click on Check Profiles. And once that's done, you're ready to start using the plugin. You can try the full pro version of the plugin without buying a license, but it will have a watermark. If after giving it a try, you decide to purchase a license or subscription, then use my discount code here, GIDIFX. That way you'll get 10% off your purchase and let the good people at Dehancer know that I sent you. Before I get into my workflow, these are my project settings. I'm using the Davinci Wide Gamut and Davinci Intermediate, which is a reliable internal working color space and gamma created by Blackmagic Design. Let's now go to the edit page, add an adjustment clip above the video clip you want to grade. Adjust the length to match the video. Now you can add filters and effects to this clip like if it was any other footage. And the same will be applied to all clips below it. Okay, let's go to the color page. My node tree consists of 7 serial nodes, which I create by holding Alt and pressing S 7 times. Let me clean up my node graph. I'll add labels to these nodes to keep everything organized, then explain what I do in each of them as I go. I'm using the keyboard shortcut Alt plus N to label the nodes. Okay, node the first will be a color space transform from the camera's color space into Davinci Wide Gamut. And node the 7th will also be a color space transform from Davinci Wide Gamut into my delivery color space, which is Rec 709. Thus our color correction and grade will be in between these two nodes. Let me label the rest quickly. Node the 2nd will be exposure. Node the 3rd, contrast. Node the 4th, white balance. Node the 5th, saturation. And finally, node the 6th will be our color grade node or the look node. Here is where Dehancer comes in, but more of that in a moment. But first, let's go to our first node and color transform this space. Under the Effects tab, search for Color Space Transform. Here it is. Drag it to the first node. This sample clip was shot with the OG Lumix S5 in Vlog picture profile. And remember, our timeline color space is Davinci White Gamut Intermediate. So my input color space is Panasonic V Gamut. Input gamma is Panasonic Vlog. Output color space will be Davinci Wide Gamut. And output gamma will be Davinci Intermediate. Now go to the 7th node and add another color space transform. This time the input color space will be Davinci Wide Gamut and the input gamma will be Davinci Intermediate. The output color space will be Rec 709. Your output gamma will depend on where your media is being viewed. 2.2 for computer screens and 2.6 for movie theaters. But 2.4 is usually the standard gamma, so select gamma 2.4. We are starting to see some color in our footage. By the way, I chose this sample footage because of the vibrant costumes the dancers were wearing. You can watch that video in the card above, of course after this one. Alright, I'll now go to the 6th node, the look node. This is where I add Dehancer. Search for Dehancer in the Effects tab. It will be under Film Emulation. I drag this to my 6th node. You notice that my image has changed. This is because Dehancer loads with some default settings. Let's sort that out. The first thing I would recommend is holding Alt and clicking one of these drop-down arrows. This will close all the module tabs because once again, they're all open by default. This makes the plugin's UI less overwhelming, especially if you're new to it. Next thing, scroll down to Options, then click Disable All Tools. Good. That's sorted. We go back to the top, the Input tab. We'll configure these others later on. Under Input, first thing to do is select the source. I select Davinci White Gamut Intermediate. Remember, because we've already transformed the color space. Again, I'll leave these other sliders for now. What I'll use now is a Monitor tab, because the next node I work on is the second node, the Exposure node. And while working on Exposure, sometimes I use Dehancer's false color to help me see and adjust the exposure correctly. For this particular image, the sky is not so important. The most important thing that I want exposed correctly are the faces of our dancers. In any case, this footage was properly exposed in camera. Okay, having seen the overall exposure, let me turn off false color and go to my exposure node. The best way to adjust your exposure is by using the HDR wheels, and clicking here shows you what part of the image you are about to affect. I'll start with the specular and highlights. I'll reduce them just a bit as I also watch my waveform. Then go to the global exposure and reduce it a teeny bit. Again, keeping an eye on the waveform. Your changes should be very subtle, especially if you have a good image to start with. I go back to false color just to ensure my image is still good exposure-wise. I'll use this particular frame as my hero shot. Let me turn off the false color and let's see what exposure changes I've made. Before, after. Before, after. It's extremely crucial that you get your exposure right before continuing. That's okay for now. Let's go to the third node, contrast. And Davinci gives you various tools for adjusting contrast. You can use these two, contrast and pivot. You can also use the curves. I like using a mixture of both of them. Let's start with the curves. I'll create one point here in my shadows, and another here in my midtones, and another here in the highlights. Then I drag the highlights ever so slightly up, and then the shadows slightly down. Again, keeping an eye on the waveform so that I don't clip anything. Raise the midtones slightly. There. And we get the traditional S-curve. Before, after, before, after. Let me check the false color again. Nothing is clipping and our faces are still green. Finally, for contrast, I go to the color wheels and slightly adjust the contrast. Before, after, before, after. The image is slowly taking shape. Done with contrast, now we go to the fourth node, white balance, another important node. If you have something white in your image, or you used one of these gray cards / color checkers, then you can easily white balance your footage by using the white balance picker and click on the white part of the image. Or if you're using these checkers, you'd click on the middle gray. You can also use the temp and tint sliders. In this image, the umbrella back there was white, so I'll use that. Here we'll do before, after, before, after. Change the scopes to the vector scope. We are almost there. Most of the white should be at the center. This just needs a little tweak. Back at the color wheels, I'll use the offset to center the white part. Again, very slight adjustments. Before, after, before, after. The image is slightly warm, but I like it that way, especially for darker skin tones. Okay, now let's go to node 5 and add some saturation. This is how I've seen many pro colorists doing it. Right click on your saturation node and change the color space to hue, saturation, luminance. That is HSL. Then right click again and come here to channels and turn off channel 1, which is hue, and channel 3, which is luminance. Therefore, only saturation will be active. So when you come to the curves, any adjustments here will only affect saturation without touching the hue or luminance of the color. Now I slightly add saturation. Like contrast, I can adjust saturation in the shadows, midtones, or highlights as I wish. Before, after. Before, after. Let me tweak this some more. I want these colorful costumes to pop. So I'll add just a little more saturation. Great, this image looks awesome, nice and colorful. Now, once exposure, contrast, white balance, and saturation are done, your image is technically correct. That is, your image is color corrected. And if the deliverable to your client is a clean, neutral, accurate footage, then your post-processing is done and you can render here. However, sometimes even a cooked meal needs some extra sauce on it to make it. So, let's add some sauce. Let's go to a 6th node, which already has Dehancer on it. By the way, let me check false color just to make sure my image is still exposed correctly, especially the faces. Darker skin tones look balanced and neutral around 40 to 50 IRE. So the green here is just right. Good. Let's go back to the hero frame and create a filmic look in Dehancer. Under input, we had already selected the source. These exposure and white balance sliders are similar to the inbuilt Davinci tools. I prefer doing my primary corrections separately and in individual nodes for better control. But Dehancer has all the tools available for you to do the color corrections and then the color grade in just one node. I can adjust my exposure and white balance here as a creative choice and not for technical correction. Use defringe to sort any visible chromatic aberrations. Next, go to the Film tab and choose the film stock. Remember to click Enable. You have over 60 to choose from, so experiment and find one that suits the look you are going for. And by the way, if you really want to emulate a particular film, you can get the film stock that was used by searching sites like Shot on What. Let's go with Fujichrome Velvia ISO 50 for this demo. The push and pull slider is based off the real push and pull in the film process. It affects exposure and contrast. For this sample, I'll leave it as is. After choosing the film stock, next you choose the print medium for your film. Use the linear profile with positive films, meaning there is no influence of photographic paper, Kodak 2383 or Fujifilm 3513 for corresponding movie stocks, and Kodak Endura paper for photographic negative films. However, experiment and find what works for you. I'll choose Fujifilm 3513. And don't forget to enable the tab. Now, the sliders here emulate the analog printing process. I'll start with adjusting the exposure. Adjusting exposure also adjusts the contrast, like it would in the analog process. I'm making creative adjustments, so I'll just eyeball it. Target white adjusts the color temperature of the printing light source. I'll slightly cool the image. Remember, it was a bit warm earlier on. Like exposure, changing the contrast here also changes the exposure. I won't change this for now. Color density is great for creative adjustments because it doesn't affect all colors equally and linearly. As you can see, it seems to be affecting red more than any other color. I'll eyeball it again. There, looks okay. Analog range limiter creates a softer image by limiting contrast to, well, the analog range. After print, we go to the expand tab, enable it. Adjust the black and white points until it's just touching 0 and 100 respectively, though I'll leave mine unchanged for now. Those are sliders you'll probably revisit several times. Once done with input, film, print, and expand, we can go back to the other tabs. Let's start with Film Developer, where you can make additional adjustments. This one particularly helps you grade footage from an unknown camera or a camera that doesn't have a dedicated profile in Dehancer. Enable it. Then do your adjustments. I'll add just maybe a little contrast. Gamma, maybe not. And boost the color. Before, after. Before, after. That done, let's move to film compression, which fine-tunes where your highlights clip. This helps in smoothing out the highlights, giving them a filmic roll-off. I'll enable it, but leave the defaults. Okay, let's quickly go through the rest of the tools. Color head is basically analog color correction. I don't understand the technicalities here, so I'll stick to these other nodes here for color correction. Now, these tools here, like film grain, damage, breath, and gate weave, are all results of using actual film, and Dehancer reproduces them quite accurately. Let's start with film grain. Remember how I told you to note your GPU VRAM? This is why. Film grain isn't just an overlay on top of your footage. Dehancer literally reconstructs each frame. So if your GPU doesn't meet the requirements, your timeline playback will crawl almost to a halt. Select the most suitable film grain profile, with 8mm having the largest grain and 65mm more fine-grained grain. I'll choose 35mm ISO 50. Next is halation, which is a visual effect where bright areas of the image appear to glow, creating a soft halo, resulting in an reddish-orange tint around the highlights, like here, before, after. Dial the amplify slider to your preferred look. The effect here is a bit strong, which is okay if you're going for that vintage look. I would actually dial this down a bit further in a real production. But anyway, let's proceed. This video is already way longer than usual, and only about 10% of you are still watching at this point. Bloom, often called mist, is caused by imperfections in lens optics that cause diffuse glow to appear around light sources, bright areas of the scene, and along high contrast edges, creating a very dreamy image. Like the other tools, 8mm is more pronounced than 65mm. Great. Next is film damage. Enable film damage to give your footage that authentic, grungy, filmic look. You can emulate the standard film formats. Next is film breath, which is the accidental change in exposure, contrast, and color from frame to frame as the film moves. Next is gate weave, which is the mechanical swinging of a film strip as it's pulled through the frame window of, say, a film projector. I won't enable this in this case. Next is overscan, which adds those film perforations on the sides. You can select the gate type, gate shape, and customize these other sliders as you wish. Next, you can add a vignette. This is a common effect. Again, adjust these sliders accordingly. I'll leave this enabled. Almost there. The Output tab controls the overall impact of all the enabled effects in the Dehancer plugin. So 0 is like disabling all the effects. Finally, you can export your grade within the Dehancer plugin as a LAT file, that is lookup table, to reuse in the next project. Note though that you can't export grain, bloom, halation, and vignette effects, as those are calculated frame by frame. Okay, that's it. Let's summarize and go over the whole color grade workflow, node by node. Let's disable all the nodes, which you can do by clicking on the node number. This was our original footage. We started by transforming our color space. Then we did our primary corrections, that is exposure, contrast, white balance, and saturation. Then we sprinkled some sauce on top. We did our color grade in Dehancer, and this was the look we got. Now, you can add secondary corrections like color wrappers, masks, sharpening, etc. But that is beyond the scope of this video. But if you'd want to see more of that, comment down below. Further, to stay organized, you can select your primary correction nodes, right-click, and create a compound node, and name it primaries. Double-click to access the nodes within it. Similarly, select the secondary correction nodes, right-click, and create another compound node. Name it secondaries. And this is how the final node tree will look like. The main pro to me is that Dehancer is a time saver, and you know time is money. In this day and age of extremely short turnaround times, you need to be as efficient as possible, and Dehancer has the tools for you to use it as the only node for your color corrections and your color grade. Or like how I did it for the color grade only, and you saw how easy it was to achieve a good look very quickly. And once you have dialed in your look, you can export as a LAT file to reuse the next time. To be honest, you can achieve the film look in many ways, but a plugin like Dehancer makes it easier and faster. You can easily match the look on multiple cameras, especially if you're trying to match a prosumer camera with a more top-tier pro camera. And finally, Dehancer accurately emulates many film stocks. The film grain, halation, and bloom is not just an overlay, but Dehancer uses algorithms to recreate these film effects. And talking about algorithms, one con is that your hardware will take a beating, especially when you enable film grain, halation, gate weave, and so on. So make sure that your hardware, especially the GPU VRAM, meets the minimum requirements. But the main con is the price, which, if I recall correctly, has significantly increased over time. When I first heard about Dehancer a few years ago, it was about 350 USD. Now it's 540 USD. That's not a small amount of money for a plugin, especially for young or beginning filmmakers. But if you use it in professional work, you can recoup that amount very quickly. And again, you have the option of paying for just a month if a certain project demands it. This can be a pro or con depending on who you are, but I think you must know or understand how the traditional film process works to get the most out of Dehancer. So if you are from that world, then you'll flow the terminologies in Dehancer, else you might get a bit overwhelmed. Push, pull, gate weaves, color head, all those terminologies. Another con, and again these are now minor, this stylized film look is not for every project. And finally, Dehancer is not available for open source photo and film editors like GIMP or Shortcut. Though they did say if there is enough demand for it, then they would make one. Dehancer is also available online in this link and also in the description below. I didn't go over all its functions, so I'll just give a brief overview here and may probably do another video just for the online version. Okay, I'll drag in my photo. The image is uploaded and processed. It then loads with a number of film presets ready for your preview. There is a featured section curated by the Dehancer team, color film and black and white film. Click on a preset of your choosing. Then you can do further adjustments using the tools up here. Light, that is brightness and contrast. Color, that is temperature and tint. I can choose this for example. And effects, that is grain, bloom, halation, and vignette. All of which you can adjust to your liking. You can also adjust the preset further by clicking on adjust. All these tools basically work the same way as the desktop version. So experiment away. When you're done, click export. You have three options: lossless, best quality JPEG, and optimized for web. Select one. Wait a moment as Dehancer renders the image. Then download the graded image to your computer. Anyway, that was a not so brief overview of my color grading process. Hope you learned something, and if you did, give the video a like and share it with your fellow filmmaker. You can also learn how to get automatic subtitles in the free version of Davinci Resolve here. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, lights out.